In this video, we're going to talk about the biggest mistake that you can fall into when looking for a used Subaru WRX of any year. And one of the reasons I'm making this video is not only have I bought many used WRXs in my lifetime and helped others buy many used WRXs in their lifetime. As many of you guys know, if you follow the channel, I am looking for a used VA WRX to bring onto the channel so I can have a VA and a VB. And there seems to be something that is more and more common than it used to be. And it's a massive pitfall that a lot of people can fall trap into, and it will basically cost you not just thousands but tens of thousands of dollars. And it's something that's easier to fall into than you'd think, especially if you're not as intimately familiar with the platform than you might be if you haven't owned a WRX or if you've only owned one before. So in this video, whether you're new to this car or not, I can guarantee you that if you ever buy a used WRX, even if you own one now, it's probably still worth watching the video. I can potentially help you save, $10,000, $15,000 if you just stick through the video. But let's jump into it, because it's quite literally one singular thing that will help you avoid some of the biggest issues that you're gonna find with this platform. Now you might say, hey man, how can you have one problem that helps you solve and avoid all the expensive problems? Well, I can tell you that these cars are incredibly reliable if they're taken care of well, and just generally, these are very reliable cars. So when you're looking for a used car, you face risks whatever you're choosing to do. Buying a used car is a risk. It's easier to buy a new car, but we don't have infinite money, and that's not just a reality. So what I'm saying here is there's one big standout item that is, again, more common than not. Let's just dive straight into it. So in my journey over the last decade of buying Subaru WRXs and looking at them and all that stuff, and especially now where I'm trying to find like the perfect one and I'm talking to a lot of people, one of the most common things that you'll find on the market are obviously modified Subaru WRXs. Same goes with STIs. Now people, they think that modifying their cars increases their value. That's a whole nother conversation. If you're selling your modified WRX or STI, I highly recommend parting it out. You'll make more money and it'll be easier to sell the car in the first place. But you do find modified WRXs and STIs on the market, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, just on the used market. And that's not necessarily a negative thing. Buying a tuned or modified WRX or STI can be great if you want to save some money on parts, get a great discount, but it can also be a money pitfall and almost an immediate route to engine failure or transmission failure. Now, I've personally now run down the rabbit hole of looking for WRXs with blown engines or blown transmissions. And in the 6 months that I'm doing so, I've actually run across maybe I'd say about a third of the folks that are selling their WRXs that have a failed engine or failed transmission are within a year or two of ownership of that car. And the reason I'm kind of augmenting my story here is because people are falling into this. So I'm basically saying this is happening. It's not hearsay. But the short answer is what happens is people buy these cars from owners that don't really know what happened with their car or why it was built the way that it was. So let me back up for a second. What's happening is people are buying modified or tuned WRXs, right? They're then owning it and then they're selling it again. And that is the biggest red flag ever. If you have an individual that owns a WRX or STI that has any modification and that person can't intimately tell you what was done, who did it, why it was done, what it's doing, how long it's been on there, all those things, stay away. The big reason is because often the people strip these cars or part them out, and more often than not, and if you don't believe me, go on Facebook Marketplace right now, you could be scrolling over used car ads, right, for WRXs or STIs, let's say a FA20 motor, and you could be looking at a stock, never tuned car, right, without a visible access port, yeah? Let's say a 2016 WRX, because I was just looking at one the other day. They didn't post an engine photo when I went to see it, but it had a blown engine, right? It had rod knock. And I showed up and I popped the hood and it was running a Cobb intake, a Cobb top mount intercooler, an air oil separator, a charge pipe, and a non-hybrid blow-off valve, right? So most of us are already saying to ourselves, whoa, hang on. What was going on? So I asked the guy when I showed up, I said, were you leaning out? Were you having any issues with running? How was it running? And he goes, it was running perfectly. And I was like, so who tuned your car? And he was like, oh, it's not tuned. And I was like, how fast did the car feel? And he goes, well, I was consistently gapping STIs. And I was like, okay, so sounds like you are running a tuned car, but you don't have your access port anymore. And he was like, well, shouldn't the guy have told me it was tuned? And I was like, well, it was probably your responsibility to ask when you bought the car. And I said, and he was like, well, do you think that's why the engine blew? And I was like, I have no idea, but it doesn't help that you don't know any of the history of your car, and whether you're tuned or not, you're running an imbalance on your engine. It's not a factory setting. Now, I think most of us would be saying, that's so crazy that that happens, and I think some of us might even say, I'm in that boat. If you're in that boat, strip your car to stock and rebuild it so you understand what's happening. For the rest of us, it's very common, right? There are parts with these cars that have to be tuned. My favorite one are people that wipe a check engine light and there's a J-pipe on them. I see it all the time. And then you turn the engine over a couple times, you drive it a little bit, you turn the engine over a couple times, and all of a sudden you have a check engine light. And you know, what am I talking about here? Well, this has happened many, many times to me as I'm looking for a VA. The person's got a J-pipe on it. They didn't want to take it off because they're too scared of breaking a stud, a turbo stud, taking off the J-pipe. So they leave it on and they sell the car with an exhaust, but they take everything else because they want to get the most out of their access port and all the other aspects to it. And they just sell it to some schmuck saying there's an exhaust leak or something like that. The amount of folks that have also tried to sell WRXs where I talk with them and they're like, oh, there's a check engine light. And they're like, oh, it's just this. And I'm like, well, can I bring my code reader? And they're like, no, 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 don't worry about it. I know it's just this. You know, so people are like, I don't want to say they're scamming, but like there is a level of lack of knowledge, or they're trying to pass by something that they can sell, something like that. So I've rambled a little bit here. Where is this video supposed to go? There is an epidemic, and if you don't believe me, go online and look, because it's all over the place, of people selling these cars modified. The reason why the cars are worth less modified is if you can't provide an intimate history of what's been done to the car. Yes, people will buy modified cars. Should you, as somebody that's done this for a while, that runs a business in the aftermarket parts company, honestly, I would say no. If you see a modified WRX, don't buy it unless you have a complete history. One of the beautiful things about making content online, especially like with my last WRX, is I entertained offers while it was modified because people could see the history of what I did to the car, because I quite literally documented it. But not everyone does that. And you might also ask yourself, okay, like what's the worst that can happen? Well, your engine fails or your transmission fails. And the reason I'm making the video is because I'm literally going out and trying to buy these cars where the engine and transmission has failed from these people. You wanna know what the biggest thing that I'm running into, which is terrifying? I'm running into people that have a blown engine on a WRX with high mileage that are like, I need 15 grand for the car. And I'm like, well, I'll give you 3. And they're asking, I'm like, why do you need 15? And they're like, well, I have a loan for 15 grand. It's people that owe money on cars that are worth almost nothing. You might also ask yourself, why are you offering 3 grand for a blown engine? Well, the reality is, if you're not replacing the engine on your own, it costs about 12K if you go to a tuner to replace the engine. There are gonna be some keyboard warriors that are like, I could take it to a shop and get it done for 8. Sure, go take it to that shop and then take it back when something goes wrong. If you wanna take it to a tuner and get it done right with all the right attention to detail, you're looking 10 to 12K. And if you drop an engine in yourself, you're still with a used engine looking at 8 grand in parts, 7,500 in parts if you're really good at what you do and you have all the tools. So it's just something to think about, that these cars, once the engines go and they're in higher mileage, they're not worth what everybody thinks they are. It's like a good question of part out, by meaning strip the car for parts, versus anything else. So this is a video forewarning. If you're looking at a used WRX or a used STI, avoid and ask questions. Avoid the WRX where the questions can't get answered, and ask enough questions so you can understand whether you need to avoid it. If a person's running a tune, ask them who tuned it and when and how long they've been running the tune, and questions about the tuning. And also ask them for, you know, screenshots of the emails of their car getting tuned, because that should be easy to provide. And if somebody doesn't do that, stay away from that car with a 10-foot pole. It's pretty simple, and you won't fall into the trap that a lot of people fall into and end up being incredibly underwater with a car with a blown engine. So I make this video both as some cautionary tale, and also somebody that's, you know, I don't want to say I'm taking advantage of it, but yeah, I'm trying to buy one of these blown engine WRXs from somebody that can't fix it, right? I'm looking for a good deal. That's how a marketplace works. So, you know, it's forewarning. I'm making the video maybe because I feel a little bit guilty, but it is what it is. You know, I'm gonna build an engine on my own. So not everybody can do that. It's a skill set that you've got to put together over many years. And honestly, even just a full rebuild to me is still extremely daunting. So that's the video, guys. Stay safe, try to protect your money, and I'll see you guys in the next video.